Could Earth be just one of many test cases in the universe? We imagine Earth as unique, as the center of our experience, as the rare miracle in the middle of a cold and hostile universe. We call it home, we call it the exception, and we place it on the pedestal of the unrepeatable. But what if that's not the case? What if Earth is not the culmination of life, but simply one of many experiments scattered across the cosmos, a testing ground, a case study, a single attempt in an endless series of cosmic trials? Every astronomical discovery has chipped away at our sense of uniqueness. In ancient times, we believed Earth was the center of the universe, then we learned it circled the sun. Later we discovered that our sun was just an ordinary star in a galaxy of hundreds of billions. And beyond that this galaxy is only one among trillions. The pattern is unmistakable. The more we learn, the less unique we appear. And yet, we cling to the idea that our life here is exceptional, unrepeatable. But what if true exceptionality doesn't lie in being unique, but in being just one more expression of a universal principle? Earth is far from being a stable or safe world. It has been the stage for 5 mass extinctions, asteroid impacts, apocalyptic volcanic eruptions, and climate shifts that reshaped entire continents. More than 99% of all species that ever existed are gone. And yet, from the ashes, life always returned. New forms, new adaptations, new chances for evolution. If Earth is an experiment, it seems designed to test the resilience of life itself. The question is, what lesson is being sought? Is life capable of adapting to the impossible, of surviving disaster, of being reborn again and again? Look outward. Astronomers now estimate there are more planets than stars in the universe. Trillions of worlds orbiting, each with its own conditions, its own potential histories we may never know. Many lie in what we call the habitable zone, where liquid water could exist. But others are extreme, methane oceans, toxic atmospheres, scorching deserts, frozen wastelands. And yet, here on Earth, we find organisms thriving in conditions once thought lethal, bacteria that live in acid, creatures that endure radiation, microscopic beings that survive the vacuum of space. If life can adapt here, why not there? Perhaps each world is a laboratory, each planet a trial, each ecosystem a hypothesis put to the test. Some thinkers push the idea further. They propose that we are not only a natural experiment, but a designed one. The simulation hypothesis suggests our reality could be artificial, created by an advanced intelligence running trials on a cosmic scale. From that perspective, Earth is not an accident, but a program, a study of morality, cooperation, survival. We, unknowingly, are its subjects. And the very questions we ask, why are we here? What is the purpose of all this? Are, in truth, the parameters of the experiment. What is unsettling is not just the possibility that we are not unique, but the implication that we are not the final objective. That life on Earth may not be the grand culmination, but an intermediate step in a chain of experiments spanning the universe. If that's true, then our civilization, our cultures, even our species are part of a larger process. We are not the destination, we are the data. Accepting this possibility changes everything. It forces us to see ourselves as we may always have been, participants in a wider trial, pieces of a puzzle whose design we can barely sense. It confronts us with the fragility of our permanence, with the certainty that even our civilization, with all its technology and arrogance, may be ephemeral. And at the same time, it gives us a new sense of purpose. If we are an experiment, then every decision, every failure, every achievement is part of the lesson the universe seeks to draw from us. Earth as a laboratory of life. Earth is not the stable refuge we often imagine, but a stage of relentless trials. Since its formation more than 4.5 billion years ago, this planet has been a landscape in constant transformation, marked by catastrophes that time and again have threatened the continuity of life. When we look closely, what we find is not a perfect world designed for comfort, but a field of resistance, where every species, every form of life, must face changing conditions, lethal challenges, and forces capable of erasing entire lineages in the blink of an eye. Mass extinctions are the clearest evidence of this pattern. The most famous is the one that wiped out the dinosaurs 66 million years ago, when an asteroid struck the Yucatan Peninsula, releasing energy equivalent to millions of nuclear bombs. But that was not the only one. The so-called Great Dying of the Permian, 252 million years ago, eliminated more than 90% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial ones. In each case, life stood at the edge of total collapse. And yet, it always found a way to reinvent itself, as if Earth itself were designed not to guarantee stability, but to test adaptation. The survivors of each catastrophe became the architects of a new evolutionary chapter. After the disappearance of the dinosaurs, small mammals that had lived in the shadows took advantage of the vacuum and gave rise to ever more complex forms, eventually leading to primates and, finally, to us. It is as though Earth follows a script: destroy what is established to make room for the unimaginable. In this sense, the planet functions as a laboratory of trial and error, where failure is not an accident, but a necessary condition for progress. Geology also reveals this experimental nature. Continents drift slowly on tectonic plates that collide, tear apart, and sink, constantly altering climates and ecosystems. Glaciations repeatedly covered much of the planet in ice, forcing entire species to migrate, adapt, or perish. Even oxygen levels in the atmosphere have shifted dramatically, reshaping the balance of life again and again. These oscillations don't appear random, they appear like tests. Each time conditions changed, life responded. And that response is the raw material of evolution. If we think of Earth as an experiment, the question arises: what is really being tested? Perhaps it is not the abundance of life, but its resilience. Perhaps the lesson is not the perfection of a stable ecosystem, but the ability of life to rebuild itself in the midst of chaos. Every organism that survives is a testimony to that capacity. Every extinct species is a reminder of the limits. Together, they form a record of what works and what doesn't, as if nature were collecting data on a planetary scale. What is most fascinating is that, amid all this chaos, patterns emerge. No matter how devastating the catastrophe, life always returns with renewed strength. Plants recolonize landscapes scorched by fire. Coral reefs, after mass bleaching events, begin to recover within decades. Even after cosmic impacts and global volcanic eruptions, biological diversity finds new pathways. This pattern of resilience may be the key to the experiment, testing how far life can go, how many times it can rise after falling, how many unexpected forms it can adopt. From this perspective, Earth's history is not that of a privileged world, but that of a testing ground designed to push the limits. Every crisis, every collapse, every restart has been a question posed to the cosmic lottery: can life overcome this? And so far, the answer has been yes. The most unsettling thought is that we, as a species, are also part of this dynamic. We are not exempt from the laboratory, we are its most recent product. Our intelligence, our technology, our ability to reshape the environment, all of it is an evolutionary response to the challenges Earth has placed before us. And at the same time, it could be another test: will we survive our own capacity for destruction, or will we become part of the long list of species that failed the experiment? Earth teaches us, without words, that stability is an illusion. What is real is change. What is real is the trial. What is real is resilience, and perhaps, in the end, that is the true purpose of this laboratory we call home. Parallel worlds and other test cases. If Earth can be understood as a laboratory, we must also recognize that it is not the only one. The universe is filled with planets, perhaps more than we can ever imagine. Astronomers estimate that there are more worlds than stars, which means trillions of opportunities for life to attempt an existence under unimaginable conditions. Each planet would be, in itself, a test case, a unique stage with different parameters, as if the cosmos were running parallel experiments in search of broader answers. The so-called habitable zone is only a simplification. It refers to that narrow band around a star where, in theory, liquid water could exist on the surface, but reality is far more complex. Mars, for example, lay within that zone for millions of years, and evidence suggests it once had rivers, lakes, and oceans. And yet something failed. Its atmosphere was stripped away, its water evaporated or froze, leaving behind a cold, barren desert. If Mars was once a laboratory for life, it failed or remained incomplete. And still, it stands as a valuable record, another data point in the grand cosmic experiment. Beyond our solar system, the Kepler telescope, and more recently the James Webb, have revealed thousands of exoplanets. Some are gas giants, others rocky like Earth. Some orbit unstable stars, others belong to binary systems. Each one represents a different possibility: thick methane atmospheres, global oceans, frozen worlds beneath crusts of ice. On some of them, life could thrive in ways we can barely begin to imagine. This is where extremophiles become essential, organisms on Earth that defy our expectations. There are bacteria that survive in hydrothermal vents at over 100 degrees Celsius, where the pressure is enough to crush submarines. Others endure in lakes of sulfuric acid, in oxygen-free caves, or even inside nuclear reactors. Microbes have been revived after being frozen for tens of thousands of years. And tardigrades, those nearly indestructible microscopic animals, survive radiation, the vacuum of space, and extreme temperatures. These examples show us something crucial: life is not fragile. It is plastic, versatile, capable of colonizing the harshest extremes. If life can be this adaptable here, what would prevent it from existing elsewhere, in conditions hostile to us? Perhaps an ice-covered world like Europa, moon of Jupiter, hides warm oceans beneath its frozen surface, teeming with creatures that will never see sunlight. Perhaps on Titan, moon of Saturn, life uses liquid methane instead of water. To us, these would appear as alternative test cases, experiments with altered parameters. Can life exist without oxygen, without light, without water? If we view the universe as a vast laboratory, then Earth is not the final result, but only one example among billions. Each planet is like a variation on the same experiment, with slightly different conditions, testing hypotheses we don't yet understand. Does life require water? The cosmos seems to be running trials that answer both yes and no simultaneously. Does it require oxygen? The experiment continues, scattered across countless corners of the universe. And yet, this leads us to an even deeper reflection. Are these worlds merely natural stages, or part of something greater by design? Is the universe itself the grand scientist, conducting these trials through the laws of physics? Or is there something more, an intelligence behind the curtain, setting the variables, observing the results? One truth is clear: even though we have not yet found life beyond Earth, the overwhelming number of planets forces us to admit that it would be strange if we were alone. In fact, loneliness seems the least likely hypothesis. Life, when given the chance, tends to emerge, and once it emerges, it tends to adapt. The real question, then, is not whether life exists elsewhere, but how many of those worlds are, like Earth, laboratories still unfolding their experiments. Every new exoplanet discovered brings us closer to that answer. Every atmospheric anomaly, every chemical imbalance in a distant world could be the fingerprint of biology at work. Perhaps we have already encountered signals and simply lack the understanding to interpret them. Perhaps, somewhere out there, a test is running not so different from our own. The conclusion is unsettling. We are not an isolated miracle, but a single chapter in a library of worlds, each one engaged in constant experimentation. And if this is true, the question we must ask is not simply, is there life out there? But what role does Earth play in this immense cosmic laboratory? Cosmic intelligence and the simulation hypothesis. The idea that Earth is a laboratory of life can be understood in natural terms as the consequence of physics and biology. But there is a more unsettling possibility, that it is not a spontaneous experiment, but a designed one. This hypothesis forces us to ask whether, behind the apparent neutrality of the cosmos, there could exist an intelligence that observes, records, and manipulates the variables. In other words, what if our very reality is a simulation, a conscious experiment in which we are the subjects? The simulation hypothesis, argued by philosophers such as Nick Bostrom and debated by leading scientists, suggests that a sufficiently advanced civilization would have the ability to create virtual realities so complete that their inhabitants would never realize they were simulated. If technology continues to progress at the rate we see today, what would prevent our own descendants, in some distant future, from simulating entire universes with consistent physical laws? If that is possible, then statistically it becomes more likely that we are living inside a simulation than in the so-called base reality. From this perspective, Earth is not merely a planet evolving under natural laws, but a stage carefully programmed. Natural catastrophes, environmental conditions, even the emergence of intelligent species could be elements of a deliberate plan, the purpose. It could be as simple as studying how life evolves under different parameters, or as complex as evaluating morality, cooperation, or a species' ability to transcend its own limits. In this context, we are not living out human history. We are unfolding the parameters of an experiment designed to watch our choices and their consequences. Certain features of our universe deepen this suspicion. The physical constants, the speed of light, the strength of gravity, the properties of fundamental particles appear to be fine-tuned with uncanny precision to allow life to exist. Scientists call this the fine-tuning of the universe, a fraction more or less in any of these constants, and there would be no stars, no planets, no complex molecules. Is this mere coincidence, or is it the result of conscious design, of a code written with mathematical precision? Some physicists compare these constants to the settings of a program, initial parameters that determine how the simulation unfolds. From this angle, the universe could be nothing more than a mathematical engine, a vast software running on an unknown hardware. And Earth, within it, would be just one of many parallel simulations, each testing a different variation. If so, then not only are we not unique, we may be replicable, reproducible, multiplied infinitely in a sea of virtual realities. The idea that we are observed adds yet another layer of unease. If this simulation exists, who is behind it? A future human civilization experimenting with its past, intelligences from another universe? Or forms of consciousness that transcend our very notion of the physical? To us, they would be invisible gods, programmers who decide fates with a click, entities who script the narrative of our history. What we call chance, destiny, or providence might simply be the algorithm of the simulation at work. Yet even without invoking external beings, the idea of simulation reshapes our understanding of reality. It forces us to confront free will. If everything is programmed, how much of our choice is truly ours? And yet, perhaps the very purpose of the simulation is to observe how we act when we believe ourselves free. Perhaps freedom is not an illusion, but the most important variable of the entire experiment. This hypothesis does not replace science, it expands it. It invites us to consider that the fundamental question may not be where do we come from, but who is observing and why. And though we cannot yet prove it, the mere act of considering it places us on a level of reflection that transcends the ordinary. Because if we are part of a design, if Earth is a conscious test inside a programmed cosmos, then every human action takes on new weight. We would not simply be inhabitants of a planet, but subjects of an experiment whose outcome is still undecided. In the end, what terrifies and fascinates alike is the possibility that we may never know for certain. As with any well-designed experiment, the subjects are never given the instruction manual. And perhaps that is the true secret of the universe, that its purpose is hidden within its very mystery. Lessons of collapse and renewal, the history of Earth is also the history of its falls. No species, no ecosystem, no civilization has ever stood outside the fragility imposed by this planet. And yet, every collapse has carried within it the seed of rebirth. If we think of Earth as a testing ground, then its geological and cultural records seem to follow a pattern: destroy, transform, and begin again. Perhaps the true experiment is not about measuring the duration of life, but about its ability to regenerate after disaster. Mass extinctions are the clearest form of this pattern. The disappearance of the dinosaurs opened the way for mammals and, eventually, for us. The great dying of the Permian, which nearly erased all life, became the prelude to new evolutionary radiations that gave rise to creatures never seen before. The universe seems to ask the same question again and again. What emerges when everything that came before disappears? So far, the answer has been striking. Always something new. Something unexpected, something impossible without the collapse that preceded it. But it is not only biology that follows this logic. Human civilizations have also risen and fallen in cycles of glory and ruin. The Roman Empire, once thought eternal, fragmented into smaller medieval kingdoms. The Maya abandoned their cities, leaving jungles to consume temples and pyramids. The Khmer Empire, builders of Angkor Wat, crumbled for reasons we still don't fully understand. In each case, collapse was not the absolute end, but the beginning of a new order. With each fall, knowledge was lost, but conditions for new forms of organization were born. The unsettling thought is that this pattern may not be an accident of history, but a constant of the experiment. As if the rule were simple, nothing is permanent, everything must be tested until it breaks, and from the fragments, something different will arise. From this perspective, collapses are not mistakes, they are results. The lesson is not the eternity of a form of life or a culture, but its capacity to transform, or to make way for another. Even natural catastrophes follow this logic. A volcanic eruption devastates an ecosystem, yet fertile soils emerge from the ash, drawing in new life. Wildfires destroy, but also trigger the germination of seeds that can only sprout under extreme heat. Collapse is part of the process, the necessary condition for renewal. It is a principle written into nature itself. Widening the view, this cycle may be a cosmic constant. Stars that explode as supernovas release the elements that form planets and living beings. Galaxies that collide give rise to new cosmic structures. Nothing in the universe remains the same. Everything is born, collapses, and is reborn. Why, then, should Earth and the life it harbors be the exception? For us, each collapse is a tragedy. For the cosmic experiment, each collapse is a data point. The disappearance of species, the fall of empires, the loss of knowledge all become part of an invisible record that may be pointing toward a greater conclusion. Perhaps the universe is not seeking to preserve specific forms, but to test the capacity to generate new ones. Perhaps resilience is not measured in permanence, but in the strength of transformation. The inevitable question is this: will we, as a species, become just another lesson in this cycle? Is our present world edging toward a collapse designed, not as punishment, but as the next stage of the experiment? What we interpret today as climate crisis, resource depletion, or global tensions, could these be preludes to a transformation we cannot yet imagine? To think this way is not to sow despair, but to broaden perspective. If Earth functions as a laboratory, collapse is not the exception, it is the rule. And every rebirth, though painful, demonstrates that life finds unforeseen pathways. Perhaps the real result sought by the experiment is not the avoidance of collapse, but what we choose to do after it. Within this reflection lies a deeper message: we should not see endings as failures, but as transitions. The history of this planet teaches us that what looks like an absolute end always becomes a beginning. And perhaps, within this constant rhythm of destruction and renewal, lies the true purpose of the test we call existence, the hidden criteria of the test. If we accept the idea that Earth is a laboratory, a stage where life is tested again and again, one unsettling question emerges: what are the criteria of this test? What exactly is being evaluated? It is not enough to say that life survives. The real mystery is to understand which aspects of existence are being measured, as if there were an invisible standard deciding which forms endure and which fade away. One possibility is that the experiment measures resilience. The history of life is marked by crises that force every organism to either adapt or perish. From microbes thriving in extreme environments to human civilization surviving wars and catastrophes, the pattern suggests that the key is not perfection, but adaptability. Perhaps what is truly at stake is not who is strongest at any given moment, but who can transform when everything familiar collapses. But resilience is not the only imaginable criterion. Another is cooperation. In biology, the organisms that succeed are those that form alliances. Cells that learn to cooperate gave rise to multicellular life. Human societies that found ways to collaborate built cities and cultures. Maybe the experiment is not only about surviving the impossible, but about whether survival is possible together, overcoming the instinct to destroy one another. There may also be a test of consciousness. Life has existed for billions of years, but self-awareness is a recent phenomenon. We can ask where we came from, what our purpose is, and what place we hold in the cosmos. That capacity for reflection may itself be the true criterion. What does a species do when it realizes it is part of a greater mystery? Does it ignore the question, or does it turn it into the driving force of its development? Technology adds yet another dimension to the test. In just a few centuries, we have advanced from primitive tools to sending probes to the edges of the solar system and building global networks of information. Yet the same technology that elevates us also threatens to destroy us. Perhaps the test is not whether we achieve technology, but how we wield it. Will artificial intelligence, nuclear power, or genetic engineering become tools of survival or seeds of self-destruction? Maybe the real question is this: can a civilization manage the power it creates without being consumed by it? And then there is ethics. Throughout history, cultures have developed moral codes, religions, and philosophies. Again and again, humans have intuited that their actions carry consequences beyond the immediate. If the universe is an experiment, what if one of its hidden criteria is whether a species can cultivate compassion, justice, and responsibility? Perhaps the test is not merely biological or technological, but moral. The difficulty lies in the absence of a manual. We do not know if we are passing or failing. We can only infer, from the patterns of life and history, what the criteria might be. And that uncertainty may itself be part of the design. In a well-crafted experiment, the subjects never know what is being measured. They simply act, revealing their true nature. This places us before an uncomfortable mirror. If the criteria include resilience, cooperation, consciousness, technology, and ethics, how are we responding in this moment of history? We are resilient, yet approaching planetary limits. We know how to cooperate, yet divisions deepen. We have achieved awareness, but often use it to deny uncomfortable truths. Our technology is astonishing, yet dangerous. Our ethics exist, yet too often yield to ambition or fear. Earth, as a laboratory, gives us no clear answers. It only places us before challenges that reveal who we are. And if hidden criteria do exist, then what is at stake is not simply the success of a single species, but the direction of the entire human experience. Every individual and collective choice becomes part of the data, part of the conclusion this cosmic experiment seeks to reach. Perhaps the real question is not whether we will survive, but what we will reveal about ourselves in the process. Perhaps the true test is not to exist, but to show what it means to exist fully, echoes of myths and ancient knowledge. If Earth is a laboratory, then perhaps we are not the first to participate in this test. Scattered clues, fragments preserved in myths and in ancient ruins suggest that civilizations may have existed before us, some possibly with advanced knowledge, others with forms of organization we can scarcely imagine. What fascinates is that these traces do not appear as clear records, but as echoes, mythological stories, impossible monuments, and knowledge seemingly ahead of its time. The myths of great floods are one of the most compelling examples. From the Epic of Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia to the biblical tale of Noah, to the traditions of native peoples across the Americas and Oceania, the story repeats with uncanny precision, a humanity reaching a certain level of development, a catastrophic deluge that wipes nearly everything away, and a handful of survivors who carry the memory forward. Are these simply coincidental cultural patterns, or fragments of collective memory of real events, perhaps the collapse of civilizations that thrived long before ours? Archaeological ruins raise similar questions. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey defies our assumptions about the origins of civilization. Its massive stone pillars, carved more than 11,000 years ago, predate organized agriculture and writing by millennia. How could a supposedly hunter-gatherer society have erected such a complex? Some interpret it as evidence that humanity's path to civilization was not a sudden leap, but the echo of inherited knowledge, fragments passed down from an earlier stage we have yet to uncover. Elsewhere, discoveries deepen the mystery. Off the coasts of Japan and India, submerged structures have been identified that may be the remnants of ancient cities now buried beneath the sea. Places like Yonaguni or the Gulf of Cambay suggest that what we call prehistory may once have been home to cultures erased by the rising oceans at the end of the last ice age. If such societies existed, their ruins did not survive the waters, but their memories may have been reshaped into legends carried across generations. The megalithic constructions of the ancient world reinforce this idea. Stonehenge, the Egyptian pyramids, the temples of Malta, or the walls of Puma Punku in the Andes all share a common enigma: astronomical alignments, architectural precision, and symbolic depth that seem to exceed the technical capacities attributed to their eras. They may not be proof of impossible technologies, but they could represent transmitted knowledge, fragments of a prior wisdom that endured through collapse. Egyptian tradition spoke of Zep Tepi, the first time, an era when gods walked the earth and taught humanity arts and sciences. The Maya described cycles of creation and destruction, while Hindu cosmology speaks of the yugas, vast ages where humanity rises and falls in endless cycles. Though wrapped in symbolism, these narratives seem to point toward a single pattern: civilizations that once existed, earlier trials, forgotten lessons. Viewed with absolute skepticism, these are myths without substance. Viewed as memory fragments, they take on a new dimension. The task is not to accept every story literally, but to recognize that myths may function as repositories of veiled memories. Human memory is fragile, yet oral tradition can preserve concepts and images across millennia, distorted but not erased. What if these stories are the echoes of previous tests in this planetary laboratory? This possibility forces a deeper question. What if we are not the first civilization to be evaluated on Earth? What if others walked this path before us, reached extraordinary achievements, and then vanished, leaving behind little more than whispers in stories and scattered stones on the landscape? Perhaps the hidden criteria we considered earlier, resilience, cooperation, consciousness, ethics, were measured long before our arrival, and the experiment continues again and again with new participants. The echoes of the past are both warnings and clues. They remind us that what we consider unique may be repetition. They show that memory may fade, but symbols endure. And they invite us to listen differently to the ancient stories we so often dismiss as fantasy. For within them may lie the key to understanding that Earth is not only a laboratory, but a stage that has hosted multiple tests, of which ours may be only the latest: identity and the mirror effect. To accept the possibility that Earth is merely a test case within a universe filled with parallel experiments is more than a scientific reflection, is a direct blow to our identity. For centuries we have defined ourselves as unique, as the center of creation, as the culmination of a cosmic process. Even after realizing that we orbit an ordinary star in a common galaxy, we cling to the belief that human life is exceptional. But what happens to that identity when we consider the idea that we may be nothing more than one example among countless cosmic trials? The first impact is psychological. Human beings construct meaning out of uniqueness. We like to believe that our suffering, our achievements, and our stories occupy a privileged place in the fabric of the universe. If we were to discover that we are not the central experiment, but only one among many, that sense of importance would dissolve. We would be forced to see ourselves as part of a much larger pattern, as just another chapter in a book that is not written around us. It is an uncomfortable mirror, because it reflects our fragility and our impermanence. Identity also relies on continuity. We imagine ourselves as heirs of a linear story from the first hominids to today's technological civilization. We believe that our narrative is progressive, that we are always moving forward. Yet if there were earlier trials, civilizations that rose, thrived, and fell, our continuity is fractured. What we call progress may simply be a cycle, a repetition disguised as novelty. This idea erodes our identity because it confronts us with a difficult truth: we may not be the pinnacle, but only a transitory phase. And yet, the mirror does more than humble us, it can inspire. If we recognize ourselves as part of a greater cycle, we stop obsessing over the illusion of permanence. We understand that what matters is not how long we last, but how we inhabit the time we are given. Our identity no longer depends on being eternal, but on being meaningful amid impermanence. In this sense, the experiment does not diminish us, it grants us a renewed purpose. This mirror also forces us to rethink the relationship between humanity and the cosmos. For so long, we have seen ourselves as spectators of an indifferent universe. But if we are part of an experiment, then we are deeply woven into its logic. We are not observers, we are participants. And that radically changes the question of identity. It is no longer, what are we in the universe? But what are we revealing about ourselves through our existence? Our collective identity is also challenged. Today we divide ourselves into nations, religions, ideologies, as if each group held the essence of who we are. But if humanity as a whole is only one test case, those divisions become irrelevant on a cosmic scale. From the perspective of a universal experiment, what matters is not which group prevails, but what the species as a whole demonstrates. Are we capable of cooperation, of balancing power with compassion, of surviving our own contradictions? The mirror also returns us the question of meaning. If identity is no longer based on being unique, what remains? What remains is the chance to build meaning from consciousness itself. The knowledge that we are ephemeral, that we are one phase in a greater cycle, gives us a profound responsibility to live with as much clarity as possible, not as masters of a universe designed for us, but as temporary custodians of an experience that repeats and transforms. This transformation of identity is not easy. It requires letting go of the illusion that humanity is the center of the cosmos. It requires accepting that we are a reflection in a wider mirror, a fragment of a pattern beyond our control. But it also invites us to an act of maturity, to stop seeking greatness in exclusivity and to find it in participation. Our identity does not lie in being unique, it lies in being part of a mystery that transcends us. Thus, the mirror effect does not destroy us, it reveals us. It shows us that what we are matters not because we are permanent, but because we are aware. And perhaps that is the true criterion of the test, discovering who we are when we finally realize we are not the center, but a reflection within the universal experiment. Cosmic continuity, beyond us. When we speak of experiments, we often imagine processes with a clear beginning and a defined end. But in the context of the universe, time takes on another dimension. Planetary life cycles, geological eras, and cosmic processes unfold over millions or even billions of years. From that perspective, our existence is nothing more than a fleeting instant. And yet, even the ephemeral can hold meaning if it forms part of a larger chain of continuity. Humanity may not be the final outcome of the experiment, but only an intermediate stage, a sample within a process that will continue long after we are gone. Picture other species, on other worlds, participating in their own trials. Some may already have failed, leaving ruins hidden beneath oceans or locked away under ice. Others may have reached levels of knowledge we cannot yet imagine. And still others, like us, may be at a crossroads, questioning their purpose, struggling against their limitations, facing the dilemma of self-destruction or transcendence. If each planet is a laboratory, then cosmic continuity is an invisible archive where the results of these countless trials accumulate. In this archive, our story is neither central or irrelevant. What we build, what we destroy, and how we endure becomes part of the universal record. Every civilization that collapses adds data to the pattern. Every species that survives a catastrophe demonstrates a path forward. Every failure, every success, every transformation becomes a fragment of a mosaic that only gains meaning on the cosmic scale. The question is, who observes this archive? Is it the universe itself, learning through its own laws and cycles? Or is there a higher intelligence gathering and analyzing the results? If we accept the naturalist view, then cosmic continuity is simply the unfolding of universal evolution. No judgment, no plan, just the experiment itself. But if we accept the possibility of design, then each phase of our existence may be under observation, evaluated by unseen witnesses as part of a learning process that transcends us. Either way, the conclusion is the same. Humanity is not the end of the story, but a bridge towards something else. Our civilization may collapse, but others will rise. Perhaps here on Earth, perhaps in some distant corner of the universe. And those new forms of life will inherit, directly or indirectly, the lessons we leave behind. Even if we vanish, our traces remain in the altered layers of rock shaped by our technology, in the DNA that carries our imprint, in the radio signals expanding silently into the stars. We are part of a continuity that does not depend on our permanence, but on our participation. This continuity also reveals itself in biology. Life on Earth did not begin with us, and it will not end with us. We are descendants of single-celled organisms that endured unimaginable extremes, and we are the ancestors of life forms that do not yet exist. If we disappeared tomorrow, other species would take our place, continuing the chain of adaptation and transformation. In the cosmic experiment, humanity is not the conclusion, but a phase. The deeper reflection emerges when we consider that our disappearance would not necessarily be a failure, but a transition. The experiment may not aim to immortalize any one species, but to explore the infinite possibilities of life. We have contributed consciousness, culture, and technology. Perhaps after us will come something that combines these achievements with a superior capacity for harmony with its environment, something that represents the next level of the experiment. To think in terms of cosmic continuity is to accept that we are not the climax of history. We are a link in a chain stretching far beyond our comprehension. And while this idea may feel humbling, it can also inspire. Because if we are not the end, then we bear the responsibility of being a worthy bridge toward what comes next. Our actions matter not because they are eternal, but because they leave marks that others will follow. Thus, the true meaning of cosmic continuity is not found in preserving what we are today, but in contributing to the greater story of the universe. We are part of a symphony in which each note is fleeting, but the whole is eternal. And in that symphony, our task is not to be the entirety, but to play our part with awareness, knowing that beyond us, the music will go on. Reflection on human responsibility. If we accept that Earth is a test case within a universe filled with experiments, an inevitable consequence emerges: our responsibility. We are not passive spectators of a cosmic stage. We are the main actors of a specific chapter in the story of life. And even though our permanence is uncertain, every decision we make becomes part of the data in this universal experiment. To ask about our responsibility is to ask what we want engraved in the record of existence. Humanity possesses something that few, perhaps no other species on this planet, has developed with such intensity: self-awareness. We know we are going to die. We know our civilization could collapse. We know the future depends on what we do now. This awareness is not merely an evolutionary accident, but possibly one of the central criteria of the test. The question is not only whether we can survive, but what we do with the knowledge that our survival is at stake. Today we face challenges that put every aspect of that responsibility to the test. Climate change, biodiversity loss, resource exhaustion, and the threat of global conflict are all expressions of the same tension. Our ability to transform the world has surpassed our ability to control ourselves. In cosmic terms, we could say we have reached a critical phase of the experiment. The question is no longer whether we can dominate nature, because we have already done so. The question is whether we can coexist with it without destroying it and without destroying ourselves. Our technology, both wondrous and dangerous, is a central part of this trial. We have sent probes to distant planets, decoded the human genome, and built artificial intelligences that mimic thought. But we have also forged weapons capable of killing millions in seconds and economic systems that deplete the Earth faster than it can regenerate. Perhaps the true lesson is not in what we can invent, but in how we choose to use it. Each innovation is a fork in the road. One path leads toward the expansion of life, the other toward its collapse. Responsibility also carries an ethical dimension. How do we treat the other living beings with whom we share this planet? How do we treat the most vulnerable within our own species? If the cosmic test includes measuring cooperation and compassion, then our story is written not only in scientific achievements, but also in the acts of justice or injustice that define our societies. The experiment is not limited to biology or technology. It extends into the morality we choose to practice or ignore. Accepting this responsibility demands a shift in perspective. It means recognizing that we are not masters of the laboratory, but conscious participants. It means understanding that every action has consequences beyond the immediate, beyond our generation, even beyond our species. If Earth is a testing ground, then our legacy will not be measured only in monuments or discoveries, but in how we responded to the most critical trials. Did we manage to coexist with one another? Did we balance power with compassion? Did we keep the experiment alive instead of sabotaging it? This reflection should not lead to paralysis, but to action. The fact that we are not eternal does not strip away meaning, it gives meaning. The awareness of our fragility gives us an urgency that other species do not have. We know that time is limited, and that makes every decision and act charged with significance. Our responsibility is, ultimately, to live in such a way that the human experiment contributes to the greater story of life, not as a mistake corrected, but as a lesson worth preserving. What we do in this brief instant of history will be recorded, even if only in the form of fossils, technological traces, or myths passed on to those who come after. Even if we disappear, we will leave a testimony. The question is what that testimony will say about us. That we were incapable of overcoming our divisions, that we drowned in our own arrogance. Or that we were a species that, despite its flaws, learned to see beyond itself and to embrace its place in the cosmic experiment with dignity. That is our responsibility, not to guarantee eternity, because that is not in our hands, but to decide how we want to be remembered in the continuity of the universe. We are a fleeting reflection, but we can choose for that reflection to reveal the best of the human spirit, not the worst. And perhaps, just perhaps, that is the criterion that determines whether we have passed the test, closing, and call to action. We have traveled a path that has taken us from the turbulent beginnings of Earth to the possibility that we are nothing more than a test case in the vast laboratory of the universe. We have reflected on the collapses that shaped the history of life, the civilizations that left ruins and myths as echoes of earlier trials, the hidden criteria that may be measured, and the mirror effect that reshapes our identity by showing us as part of a larger cycle. And now, at the end of this journey, one question remains: what will we do with this knowledge? If Earth is an experiment, we will never know for certain. We will not be given a manual, the rules will not be revealed. But that does not condemn us to ignorance. On the contrary, it grants us the freedom to decide. Uncertainty is the stage on which our true nature is tested. And within that uncertainty lies the essence of the trial. How do we act when we do not know if someone is watching, when we do not know the final purpose, when all we have is our awareness and our ability to choose? We could resign ourselves and live as if none of this mattered, convinced that life is a meaningless accident. Or we could embrace the idea that, even if we are a test case, every decision carries weight. The way we treat others, the way we care for the planet, the way we wield technology, and the way we search for truth, these define the outcome. The experiment does not require external observers to be valid. It is enough that we recognize the magnitude of what is at stake. The universe does not offer us easy answers. It does not tell us whether we are unique or endlessly replicable. What it does reveal, in every star and every world, is the immensity of possibility. It invites us to stop seeing life as an isolated miracle and instead as a universal principle, unfolding across countless scenarios. And within that vastness, our responsibility is immense, not to be the species that wasted its chance, but the one that understood that each moment of consciousness is both a privilege and a burden. This call to action is not an empty slogan. It is not a superficial reminder to click a button. Here, action means something deeper, to choose to be part of the search. To share this knowledge not only with others, but with yourself. To remember every day that what we live is not a mere accident, but a fragment of a larger cosmic story. When you choose to stay until the end, when you subscribe and join this journey, you are doing more than supporting a channel. You are affirming something much greater, that you refuse easy answers, that you will not settle for what is written in history books, that you want to look beyond the horizon and hear the echo of questions others prefer to silence. This channel is not a showcase of trivia, nor a simple collection of facts. It is a place for those who feel that human history is incomplete, that the universe holds secrets still hidden, that we are part of a mystery, too vast to be reduced to numbers and dates. Here, every subscription is more than a metric, it is a gesture of intellectual defiance, a way of saying, I want to keep exploring the unknown. So the invitation is clear: subscribe, share this journey, and turn your curiosity into part of a community that dares to ask what others avoid. Not because we expect final answers, but because we understand that the meaning lies in the search itself. The test may never end. Perhaps Earth is only one stage in an endless series of experiments. But our opportunity is now. Our moment is this. And what we do with it will define the trace we leave upon the universe.